The envelope didn't belong. It stood out like a ghost on my kitchen counter, thick and cream-colored, with a wax seal that shimmered in the morning light. I hadn't seen that seal in 5 years. 3 intertwined W's, carved into a ring my grandfather once wore, now pressed into red wax like a brand. It was the Whitmore family crest, and it meant only one thing. Someone had finally dared to drag me back into the story they tried to erase me from. I didn't open it right away. I just stared at it, the way you might stare at a loaded weapon someone left on your dining table. There was something grotesque in its elegance, something cruel in its formality. The last time I had stood in the same room with my family, it had ended in humiliation and silence. Deafening, complicit silence. Eventually, I slid my nail beneath the seal and unfolded the thick, expensive paper. The script was calligraphed in gold. You are cordially invited to the wedding of Connor Whitmore and Catherine Walsh. My brother, the family's favorite, the rising star of Whitmore Pediatrics, the man who once stood in front of 3 generations of our family and toasted to my failure like it was a victory. My stomach turned. Connor. He hadn't spoken my name in 5 years. A smaller, folded piece of lined paper fell out from the envelope as I tilted it. Different paper, a different kind of handwriting. I recognized the shaky slant before I even unfolded it. Please come. I miss you. They don't know I'm writing this. Mom. I stood frozen, my thumb brushing over the words again and again like they would change into something braver, something better. But no, that was it. Please come. Like she hadn't watched them erase me. Like she hadn't let Connor speak over me, laugh over me, dismantle everything I had built in front of the people who raised me. I pressed the letter to my chest for a moment, not out of sentiment, but to keep my hand from shaking. My fingers instinctively curled around the silver pendant that rested just below my collarbone, a tiny carving of Lady Justice, blindfolded, holding her scales. My grandfather, Judge Henry Whitmore, gave it to me the day I passed the bar. The last man in our family who believed that justice was for more than those with money or legacy. He died before he could see what they did to me. Maybe that was mercy. The memory came uninvited, like smoke under a door. It was Thanksgiving. 5 years ago. The long oak dining table at the Whitmore estate groaned under the weight of silver trays, roasted turkey, cranberry compote, and crystal goblets filled with wine from our grandfather's vineyard collection. Everyone was there, cousins, uncles, aunts, family friends. And I had shown up late, straight from a courthouse where I'd just finished a double arraignment. I was exhausted, my heels clicking softly on the marble floors as I entered. My blazer was still creased, my eyes still rimmed from a sleepless night reviewing affidavits for a client no one in my family would have ever shaken hands with. But I had come, foolishly hoping to be seen. Connor had already had a few glasses of wine by the time I sat down. His cheeks were flushed, his smile too wide. I saw it the second he stood glass in hand, that particular glint in his eye, the one that always meant a spectacle was about to unfold, and someone was about to bleed. "Let's raise a glass," he said, smiling toward our father, "to legacy, to keeping medicine in the family." He didn't look at me, not yet, to serving people with our hands, not hiding behind desks and courtroom tricks. The laughter started low, like a current building under the surface. A few awkward chuckles, a fork scraping a plate. Then his voice, louder, bolder. To my sister Elena, who decided subpoenas were nobler than stethoscopes. What a courageous disgrace. That was the moment. No one said a word. Not Dad, who stared at the gravy boat like it might hold the answer. Not Mom, whose eyes welled but whose lips stayed shut. Not my aunt, who had once braided my hair when I was 10 and told me I'd be the one to break barriers. They all watched and said nothing. So I folded my napkin, placed it gently on the side of my plate, and stood up. I remember how loud my chair sounded when I pushed it back, how quiet the room felt as I walked out. No one stopped me. No one called my name. And that was the night I ceased to exist in their story. Until now. I stared down at the invitation, still trembling slightly in my hand. Connor was getting married, and for some reason they wanted me there, or at least my presence would be convenient for whatever image they were trying to project. Was it an olive branch? A trap? A chance to parade me like a cautionary tale? Or maybe, just maybe, it was a crack in their polished porcelain mask, wide enough for the truth to slip through. I walked over to the kitchen sink, dropped the RSVP card onto the marble counter, and poured myself a glass of water. My hand was still shaking, but not from fear, from memory, from fury, from something in between. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't look away from the pain. I stared straight at it and whispered to myself, "They buried me once, but they forgot I know how to dig." The next morning, the sky over Savannah was low and gray, like the world hadn't quite decided whether to rain or simply sulk. I stood in front of my kitchen window, the invitation still sitting unopened on the counter beside the coffee pot. I hadn't touched it again. I didn't need to. The moment I read it, something in me had already shifted, not toward reconciliation, but toward reckoning. I opened my laptop and typed the name slowly, Catherine Walsh. It didn't take long. Public records, law firm bios, local news articles. She was sharp. Graduated magna cum laude from Tulane, then went straight into housing law, tenants' rights, slumlord litigation, advocacy for the poor and displaced. Her record was impressive, but that wasn't what made me pause. A headline caught my eye. Young attorney scores landmark win in tenant eviction case. I clicked, scanning quickly until I saw it. The courtroom number, the judge's initials, my initials. I remembered her now. It was nearly a year ago. A tense morning. Catherine had stood before me, fierce and composed, defending 6 families from being evicted during winter by a developer who'd bribed their way past every city board. She hadn't flinched. She knew her facts. She challenged precedent with precision. And she'd won because I had ruled in her favor. Back then, I hadn't known her name. She was just another brilliant young attorney trying to do good. There had been no indication, none, that she was connected to the family that had disowned me. And now she was marrying Connor. Irony coiled in my gut like smoke. The brother who once mocked me for choosing law over medicine was marrying a woman who had unknowingly built her legal compass by reading my rulings. The same rulings the Whitmore family had tried to pretend didn't exist. I closed the laptop slowly and leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. Somewhere far off, a siren wailed, followed by the low grind of garbage trucks. The city moving forward while I circled back. Was this a cosmic joke? Or something else? Maybe fate didn't always roar. Maybe sometimes it whispered, softly, insistently, until you were forced to listen. I drove without thinking, letting muscle memory steer me past the courthouse, past the riverfront where tourists clutched pralines and sweet tea. 15 minutes outside town, tucked behind a wrought iron gate and a row of drooping oaks, lay the Whitmore family cemetery. I parked near the back, grabbed the small bouquet of lilies from the passenger seat, and followed the winding gravel path until I reached him. Judge Henry Whitmore, my grandfather. His grave was modest by family standards. No angel statues, no marble bench, just a rectangle of stone, slightly faded, with 5 simple words carved beneath his name: justice without fear, integrity without compromise. I knelt beside him, brushing a few leaves from the base of the headstone. "I got an invitation," I said quietly. "Connor's getting married, and for some reason they want me there." I placed the lilies down gently, then pulled from my coat pocket a small yellowed envelope. I'd carried it for years, never opened it. Grandpa had given it to me in the hospital a week before he passed. "When you're ready," he'd said, voice weak but eyes steady. I was never ready. Until now. With trembling fingers I broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded twice. His handwriting was still strong, if a little shaky near the end. Elena, real power isn't loud. It doesn't bark or beg. It stands. It waits. It endures. You weren't born to please them. You were born to outgrow them. And one day, they'll see who you really are. Love, Grandpa. I didn't cry. Not right away. But something inside me loosened, cracked, and made room for breath again. I sat there a long while, letting the words echo, letting the weight of them settle. All these years I had tried to explain myself, to justify why I chose a courtroom over a clinic, why I stood for people no one else would defend. And all along, the only man whose approval had ever mattered had already given it freely. They had tried to shame me, but I had built a life that needed no permission. That night I poured a whiskey. Just one. No ice. I held the RSVP card in my hand again, flipping it back and forth like it might answer its own question. Attend or decline. 5 years ago, I would have torn it up and walked away without a word. But that woman, the one they banished, she was gone. In her place was someone else. Someone forged from silence and rulings and resilience. I grabbed a pen. I'll be there. The restaurant hadn't changed. Rousseau sat tucked behind flowering dogwoods off Bull Street, a place where Savannah's upper crust went to be seen without seeming like they wanted to be. The kind of place where white tablecloths were pulled so tight they looked like stretched canvas, and waiters moved like shadows between tables, lit only by candlelight and silent judgment. I arrived early, not out of eagerness but calculation. I wanted to see her walk in. I sat at a two-top near the window, my back straight, blazer crisp, pendant tucked just beneath the collar. I wore no makeup save for lipstick the color of dried roses and silence. When she entered, I spotted her instantly. Mom always wore navy when she was nervous, and tonight was no exception. Her hair was pulled back into a neat chignon, her heels just a little too high for comfort. She saw me, paused, smiled. It trembled. "Elena," she said, her voice thinner than I remembered. I nodded. "Mother." She sat. The waiter arrived almost immediately, of course. They remembered her. The Whitmores always got service without asking. She ordered a glass of Pinot. I ordered coffee. Neither of us touched the menus. Small talk tried to survive between us. She asked about the weather, my apartment, whether I still cooked those little vegetarian stews. I answered in monosyllables. She laughed too brightly at things I didn't say. The salad arrived. She pushed cherry tomatoes around her plate. I stirred my coffee and let the steam fog my glasses. The silence between us grew roots. Then, finally, she set her fork down with a soft click and folded her hands on the table. "I owe you an apology," she whispered. I didn't speak. "Connor told everyone you'd had a breakdown, that you left because you couldn't handle the pressure." Still, I said nothing. Her eyes flicked to mine, looking for an opening. I gave her none. "I didn't stop him," she said, barely audible. "I let him tell that story. I thought if we didn't talk about it, maybe it would go away. That it would protect the family, protect your father's name, the foundation, the donors. You understand, don't you?" I let the silence speak for me. Her voice broke slightly. "Elena, I was scared. I didn't know what to do. You were angry all the time, and I didn't know how to reach you." I finally looked at her. "You didn't have to reach me," I said, my voice low. "You only had to stand beside me." She blinked, tears welling, but I wasn't moved. I wasn't 12 anymore, crying in my room because she didn't come to the school play. I wasn't 25, begging her to come to my swearing-in while Dad said it would be embarrassing for the family. I was 34, with a federal bench review on the horizon and no space left for ghosts. "You didn't protect me," I said. "You let them bury me." Her tears spilled over now, real and messy. But it was too late for them to matter. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small velvet box. "Set it on the table between us. I want you to have this," she said. "It was always yours." I opened it slowly. Inside lay the pendant my grandfather had promised me when I passed the bar. Lady Justice, blindfolded, her scales perfectly balanced. For years, I thought it had vanished. For years, I'd assumed Connor had taken it, or that it had been quietly locked away in some drawer, out of sight like me. So here it was returned, not as a gift, as a bribe. I closed the box. I don't need tokens, I said. I needed truth. Years ago. She reached for my hand. I pulled back. I'm not here to forgive you, I continued, rising from my seat. You watched them erase me. You let them. And now you want me to smile for pictures and pretend it didn't happen. Elena, please! No, I said, voice steady. They buried me once. This time I'm digging myself out, and I'm bringing the truth with me. I walked out without another word. The pendant sat heavy in my pocket, but not as a wound. As armor. Outside, the air smelled like rain and blooming jasmine. Savannah's streets glowed beneath the soft burn of gas lamps. And with every step I took away from her, my spine straightened just a little more. They wanted me silent. They were about to get the opposite. The Whitmore estate hadn't changed. The grand foyer still smelled of lemon polish and old money, the kind that clung to velvet drapes and gold-framed oil portraits, like smoke on an heirloom coat. The moment I stepped through the front doors, a hush fell. Not loud, not obvious, but sharp enough to sting. Conversations dipped. Smiles stiffened. And the temperature of the room shifted by a single degree. I handed my coat to a waiting staff member dressed in a starched jacket, white gloves folded politely over one arm. He didn't meet my eyes. He didn't need to. His body language said enough. I wasn't expected. I wasn't wanted. I walked slowly through the marble-floored hallway, past the familiar faces frozen in canvas. Connor as a baby with milk on his chin, Connor in his white coat cutting the ribbon at the pediatric wing, Connor receiving a plaque from the hospital board. There were no pictures of me, not a single frame. It was like I had never existed. In the side parlor, a group of cousins hovered around the champagne table, their laughter bubbling too easily, too loudly. I didn't approach, but I heard them. She thinks she's somebody now, one of them whispered, too loud to be accidental. Just because she wears a robe and bangs a little gavel, another added, voice pinched with cruelty. Real success is in the blood, someone murmured, not on a nameplate. Their laughter splintered against my spine. Cold, brittle, unoriginal. I stood there for half a breath, letting the words wash over me like sleet. Then I turned on my heel, slowly, deliberately, and walked away. No confrontation, no drama, just the click of my heels against the polished marble, echoing louder than anything they said. The ballroom was crowded. A chandelier the size of a car hung overhead, its crystals throwing fractured light across silver trays and champagne flutes. The entire Whitmore clan had assembled, doctors, donors, politicians, socialites. I moved through the space like a shadow, unbothered by the polite nods and tight-lipped smiles. I wasn't here to fit in. I was here to see what they'd built on top of the hole they'd left me in. Connor stood near the fireplace, wearing a navy tuxedo and the same smug grin he wore the night he made me the punchline of Thanksgiving. His arm curled possessively around Catherine's waist, though her posture seemed tight. Her eyes flicked toward me, then away. Someone clinked a fork against a glass. The room fell into silence. Connor raised his flute. I'd like to thank everyone for coming, he said, voice rich and resonant like he'd been rehearsing it all week. It means the world to us to have our family here, those who've carried the Whitmore name with honor and pride, and our closest friends, who've walked beside us in every chapter. There was polite laughter, a few claps, and of course, he continued, eyes sweeping the room until they landed on me for just a second too long. We're grateful for all kinds of success stories, even those who think a black robe and a desk can replace legacy. The laughter that followed was louder this time, some real, some nervous. A few people glanced at me, gauging whether I'd flinch, whether I'd shatter. I didn't. I held my glass steady. I didn't raise it in toast. I didn't drink. I just stared at him, expression blank, eyes unblinking. If he wanted a reaction, he wouldn't get it. Not yet. The applause faded. The music returned. Catherine turned toward him, lips smiling, but her eyes didn't match. There was a flicker of something else. Doubt, maybe, or the beginning of recognition. I moved to the edge of the room, near a tall arched window that opened onto the back veranda. The air was thick with perfume, champagne, and the sweetness of things left unsaid. A few moments later, I felt him behind me before he even spoke. Connor. He leaned against the railing beside me, his glass swirling amber. Quite the turnout, huh? He said casually. I didn't answer. He took a sip, then glanced sideways. You've made quite a splash, Elena, he said, smiling like a man who thinks he's already won. Showing up all righteous, draped in that little pendant like it means something. Still, I said nothing. He chuckled, low, condescending. You know, he said, you throw a fit and you look petty. You stay quiet and you look weak. Either way, I win. I turned to face him, slowly. One more public lie, I said, voice flat and sharp, and I won't stay quiet. He froze mid-sip. For a moment, there was no sound but the wind through the hedges and the clink of glasses behind us. Then he smiled again. Smaller this time. Meaner. You wouldn't dare. I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because I already had. The next event came fast, just 24 hours later. A formal cocktail gathering at one of the Whitmore family's oldest allies, the Maddocks, whose estate had once been a plantation and now posed as a venue for curated Southern opulence. Twinkle lights wrapped the centuries-old columns. A jazz trio played by the hedges. The air smelled like gardenias in control. I arrived late this time, on purpose. The crowd inside was thicker. Familiar faces I didn't care to remember, and strangers pretending to care. I weaved through conversations like smoke, intangible watching. I spotted Catherine before she saw me. She stood near the fireplace, surrounded by a circle of older women in pastel dresses, all nodding politely as she spoke. Her hair was pinned back in soft waves. She wore a deep green gown that clung to her with quiet confidence. But her shoulders, they were too straight, too tense. I moved closer. So we cited Judge Whitmore's 2023 opinion on tenant protections, Catherine was saying. It completely changed our case strategy. Honestly, her reasoning reshaped the way I think about public interest law. The words hit like a match dropped in dry grass. For a second, no one else reacted. The name meant nothing to them, but it meant everything to me. Catherine had read my rulings. She had learned from them, modeled her career, her fight for the underserved, off the very person Connor had called a disgrace. And she didn't know. Not yet. Connor appeared beside her a moment later, slipping his arm around her waist like possession. He'd caught the tail end of her sentence. Oh, that was just a novelty case, he said smoothly. You know how some judges dabble in political fluff to make headlines. I didn't move. Catherine frowned slightly, eyes flicking toward him, then past him to me. Recognition hadn't dawned yet, but something in her changed. A subtle stiffening, a fracture. I stayed quiet. Not yet. Another hour passed. Laughter, wine, empty chatter. It all blurred around me. I didn't touch my drink. I didn't sit. I waited until a bell rang near the grand piano in the main salon, summoning everyone to the traditional Whitmore family toast. This was it. The room gathered, glasses refilled, smiles reassembled. Connor stood at the center, gleaming. His tuxedo was perfect, his confidence unchecked. He raised his glass. And here's to family, he said, voice ringing across the high ceilings. To those who uphold the Whitmore name with pride and honor. Polite applause. I let settle. Then I stepped forward. No microphone. No spotlight. just the quiet gravity of presence. The crowd parted slightly. Confused, curious. I reached the grand piano, opened my bag, and pulled out a plain manila folder. Placed it gently on the polished wood. My fingers moved slowly, deliberately as I opened it and spread the contents like cards in a final hand. Newspaper features, letters from the State Judiciary Committee, awards for legal excellence, commendations from housing rights organizations, case transcripts, official appointments. Each page bore one name, Judge Elena Whitmore. A hush fell over the room so thick I could hear the bubbles in someone's untouched champagne. I picked up a letter from the top. My voice was calm, clear. For outstanding service in judicial equity and commitment to public interest law, I read, issued by the Georgia Bar Association, April 2022. I looked up. Funny, I said, placing the letter back down, for someone who allegedly couldn't handle pressure. I seemed to have spent the last 5 years changing lives under it. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Catherine's face went pale. She stared at the documents, then at me, then at Connor. Something cracked. You lied, she said, not loudly, but the room still heard. You lied to everyone. Connor opened his mouth, but nothing came out. She reached for her left hand, slid the ring from her finger, slow, deliberate, unshaking. The platinum band caught the chandelier light for one last, glinting second before she placed it on the piano beside my folder. Then she looked at me. Thank you, she said softly, for showing me the truth. And then she walked out. No tears, no drama, just the quiet, unstoppable dignity of someone reclaiming herself. Behind me, Connor's voice cracked. Wait, Catherine, wait. I didn't turn around. I didn't have to. The silence she left to her wake said everything I didn't need to say. And it was only the beginning. By the time I got home that night, the city was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that settles in right before a storm breaks. I kicked off my shoes, dropped my coat on the back of the chair, and poured myself a glass of water. My body was calm, but my mind wasn't. Not yet. Then my phone buzzed, and kept buzzing. I glanced down. My stomach coiled. 3 missed calls from an unknown number. 2 from Leah, and beneath them the headlines. Not from real outlets. Not from the Post or the Chronicle, but from gossip blogs, online tabloids, the kind of places that twist shadows into substance. Disgraced judge used political pull to gain bench appointment. Former classmates say Elena Whitmore was emotionally volatile in law school. Anonymous source alleges manipulation in tenant rulings. Each title more venomous than the last. They didn't accuse, they implied. Carefully. Strategically, like cowards. No facts, no names, just innuendo and rot. My jaw locked. My pulse stayed steady. I wasn't surprised. I had expected this, because Connor Whitmore was predictable, arrogant, entitled, and desperate. I sat down at my desk, slid open the bottom drawer, and pulled out the black folder I'd kept for over a month, labeled in case he starts the fire first. Inside were documents Leah and I had compiled. Every piece of public record affirming my legitimacy, my appointment, my awards, my rulings, letters of support from Superior Court justices, endorsements from advocacy groups, testimonials from families I'd helped. Proof, not opinions, not gossip, truth. By sunrise, Leah and my media team had already sent out our package. A press release. A single quote in bold at the top. Facts are stubborn things. John Adams. No hashtags. No outrage. No defense. Just receipts. It spread faster than I expected. By noon, every major news outlet in Georgia had picked it up. By 2 p.m., national syndicates were running it. Talk radio lit up with calls. Lawyers I hadn't spoken to in years reached out. Former clients, law professors, housing advocates, women who had read my rulings and seen themselves in them. and the spin machine behind Connor collapsed. Reports surfaced that his PR firm had severed ties to preserve ethical standards. His largest donor, one of the hospital board members, publicly withdrew support. Invitations to prestigious research summits were rescinded quietly, with polite phrases like, "We're reevaluating priorities." But everyone knew. The Whitmore family released a statement the next day, 5 lines long, sanitized, hollow, the usual drivel about deep regret and upholding the family's values. Not once did they say my name, and that omission was louder than any apology, because they weren't sorry I had been hurt. They were sorry I had survived and returned. That evening I took a walk. No makeup, no armor, just me, past the old bookstores, the Spanish moss curling from the trees like whispers, past the courthouse steps I'd climbed 1,000 times. People nodded. Some smiled, but no one pitied me, because I hadn't asked for their sympathy. I had demanded their recognition. Later that night, I sat at my kitchen table, sipping ginger tea, staring out the window. The smear campaign had failed. The lies had crumbled, and Connor was unraveling. I knew he wasn't done. Not yet. Men like him never go quietly. But the ground beneath his feet had already shifted, and this time it wouldn't hold. I thought about the wedding, the one that wouldn't happen now, the speeches that wouldn't be given. The ring Catherine had left gleaming beside my folder like punctuation. They had wanted a legacy built on exclusion. But now, everyone could see it for what it was, hollow. In the drawer beside me, the letter offering a federal judgeship still sat. I hadn't signed it. Not yet. But I would. Not because I needed to prove anything, but because I had already outgrown the war they tried to start, and I had already won. The Whitmore family called off the wedding brunch. Officially, it was for private family matters. Unofficially, no one wanted to be photographed standing beside a man whose empire had begun to rot from the inside. I didn't attend. I didn't need to. I had said everything I needed to say without ever raising my voice. Instead, I wandered the edges of the estate, through the overgrown rose garden, past the koi pond my father used to show off to guests like it meant something, past the statues he had imported from Italy to prove we belonged to a legacy. I didn't pause until I reached the front lawn, wide, green manicured, a perfect stage for a family portrait that never included me. Behind me, I heard footsteps, soft, careful. I turned. It was Catherine. Gone was the designer gown. Gone was the ring. She wore jeans, a blouse, and no makeup. Just a quiet clarity in her expression that hadn't been there the night before. She walked toward me, stopped a few feet away, held out her hand, not in apology, not in pity, but in recognition. I took it, not because I needed her validation, but because I knew what it meant for someone to see you clearly and choose to stand beside you anyway. We didn't say much. We didn't have to. When she left, I watched her walk back toward the estate, head high, posture straighter than it had been at any point in that engagement. She wasn't looking back, and neither was I. The days that followed moved slowly, like water thawing from ice. Connor faded from the public eye, not in scandal, but in silence. His name stopped appearing in fundraisers. His face vanished from hospital brochures. The Whitmores did what they always did when cornered. They smiled. They pretended nothing had happened. They pivoted to the next social season. But this time their silence was part of the story, and everyone knew it. Calls started trickling in. Distant cousins, former friends of the family, even my father's colleagues from law school. Each conversation began the same. "We always admired you, Elena." I never believed what they said. "You were always stronger than them." Too little, too late. I responded to none of them, because I no longer needed their acknowledgement. A week later, I signed the federal appointment letter, alone, at my kitchen table. No applause, no champagne, just a pen, a signature, A breath. It was done. Not as revenge, as liberation. 1 year later, I stood beneath soft string lights at the Savannah Justice and Housing Gala, an event I had helped build, not for recognition, but for the neighborhoods that had believed in me long before my family ever did. The room was warm. Laughter hummed through the air. No gowns too tight to breathe in. No people trying to outrank each other. Just lawyers, organizers, mothers, tenants, stories, people. I wore a simple black gown. No designer label. No flash. Except for one thing. Tucked just below my collarbone, beneath the neckline, rested a pendant. Lady Justice. Blindfolded. Balanced. Silver worn smooth by time and belief. It no longer reminded me of who they tried to make me be. It reminded me of who I had chosen to become. As the night wound down, I stepped out onto the balcony that overlooked the harbor. The lights of Savannah shimmered on the water, like memories made kind by distance. I touched the pendant lightly and whispered to the night. They tried to erase me from the story, a pause. I wrote a better one. Sometimes the deepest betrayals don't come from strangers. They come from the people who say, we're family. But family is more than blood. It's who shows up. It's who sees you. And it's who chooses you when they don't have to. This was never about proving them wrong. It was about remembering I was never less because they couldn't see my worth. I always mattered. They just weren't the ones who got to decide it.